Hey everybody, welcome to today's podcast on managed cloud identities, and we are doing the series 100 Days of Cloud. So, in this series, we are going to do one video daily covering one of the major cloud concepts. This is not in particular to any particular vendor or any particular provider, but rather covering most of the different hybrid cloud or rather concepts around those. So, let's not wait, let's start. Today we will be discussing managed cloud identities. This is one of the very hot topics in the coming days from both architecture wise and from the development wise. Let's not wait, let's jump into it. So what exactly are managed cloud identities? Why do we need them? What is the need of the cloud identities? Most of the applications that we have, they basically maintain their own data. Most of the web apps have their own data. They maintain their own user base, all the authentication, authorization concepts, and everything is stored within the app. But lately, there is a new concept of the managed identities. So, what it means is like you own the data, but you don't host it on your server, but rather these are being hosted on a different cloud provider. So this is one of the past services that multiple cloud providers are taking care of. So they take care of everything related to your user authentication, user data, any personal data that you need to hold in addition to like your. So for example, the basic data that you maintain in your application is your first name, your last name, and your email. So these are the standard ones that are provided. Let's take an instance. You also need to store a company name of the user. In that case, we can add. So these are all these this data and many other fields like your blog URL, Facebook URL, Twitter ID, Twitter handle, and all those sort of metadata for the user, and they can be held as well along with the user data within the cloud provider. So basically, we store multiple types of data. That data could be the personal data of the user. That includes your first name, last name, email, and others. That can include your authentication data. That includes your password and claims and single sign-on with the social providers like your Facebook or Twitter. That can contain your authorization data as well. Now, authorization data is like what area a user is accessible of, or rather, what groups the user belong. Those sort of things and any other metadata that you want to hold. So most of the cloud providers provide more or less similar functionality. So something up and down, left or right, but more or less they are on the same lines. They provide the same thing. So that is all a set of user data or the identity data or that belongs to a user. Now, what happens in the traditional times? You need to store all these data along with your application as a sideload data, along with your application in a separate database. There you store this data, but lately the concept has changed. Now this data is being managed, this is being provided as another cloud service or rather a PaaS service from almost all the major cloud providers. So it's like be it Azure or be it AWS. So both of them provide. There is also a sort of service from Google, but we'll not discuss that. So we'll discuss on the Azure, the AWS, and the Auth0, which are the leading identity providers. So most important question: why do I need to keep this data on the cloud? I have my servers. I can store my tables. I can have, let's say, I have 5 or 6 different tables that store these data. Then why exactly do I need to keep this data on the cloud? So the answer is very simple. One of the major reason is the security. We'll come to the other aspects, but security is one of the major aspects. The reason being, most of the attacks that are being held, be it SQL injections or be it enumerations or other sort of attacks that are being targeted. So most of these attacks, they try to capture the user details, user data. Lately, there have been a lot of issues, lot of privacy concerns, and if you read some of the GDPR concerns, pointers in GDPR, and where the compliances straight away say that like if any of the data is compromised, you have to report it out. So it's your responsibility to how to securely hold the data, maintain the data. Now that becomes a challenge. Earlier what used to happen is like I have a table where I just put in like users and user roles, and I just define username is Vineet, user first name is Vineet, yeah, second name is Yad, email is something, something, something. But that is not the case anymore. With the upcoming GDPR and several other privacy laws across the globe, these data needs a stringent control. They need to be hashed. You can't just keep this data as a directly in your database, just like plain data that you use to maintain. Now, most of the previous sites that are there, so they are also sort of non-compliant, and there are huge penalties. If you want to move further in 2020, or rather going forward, you need to you need to comply with the GDPR or the other privacy laws, and it's better like you maintain your data securely. Now, once we move this data to the cloud, so the all these Azure or AWS or the other providers, so they are more or less by default complied to the compliances. They follow all the stringent checks, hashing, encryption, and everything is being taken control. So you move out a significant chunk from your of a user data, or rather a responsibility from your side to the cloud provider. Now, if you are a major enterprise, let it be Microsoft or HP or something, in that case, you can host it on your clouds or rather your servers as well. But if you are, let's say, a startup or a mid-size website, web app, in that case, it's better to move them to the cloud and remove the responsibility chunk from your side to the cloud provider. Now, another major reason is maintainability. So, how many times you have developed a web app, or if you are a company, you are developing web app for your clients? How many times did it happen that you have to build up a custom user interface? There is a whole lot of thing. So, user interface is one part, which is I would say very less significant. But on the other side is your maintainability of the users. If there are 100 or 500 users, and so with users there are a lot of things. Sometimes user logged out, sometimes user are not able to log in, their passwords are not working, accounts are disabled, logged out, and God forbid sometimes the accounts get hacked. So those sort of things are there that happens to users most of the time. So you have to build complete infrastructure around those objects. How does a user reset his password? How do you take care of security controls and everything? So those sort of things you have to take care of. Once we move to the cloud, those all those things are automatically taken care of. There are self-service portals where you can where the users can directly log in, and they can reset their password or update the profile. Of course, if you want to have the functionality from within your app, that is also possible. But more or less, a high level of abstraction to Bootstrap is already taken care. Now, the next point in this field is MFA, or the multi-factor authentication. So, how many times have you? So, I am guessing like most of the users who are watching this, they already know what is a multi-factor authentication. It's basically a second set of credentials that the user needs to supply. It could be a user, it could be a token, it could be a 6-digit, 4-digit PIN, it could be a acceptance to a notification from the app, it could be a code that is received on the email, it could be anything, but a second set of credential outside of a password. Now, so if you have to build MFA or a multi-factor authentication within your login system, you have to intercept the request in between. You have to modify the login process somehow, and you have to take care of. Now, it is not an easy task, and there is a significant cost and effort that is being required, and there are chances for bugs or open areas, or other security vulnerabilities or surface area for that. So again, coming to the same point, most of the cloud providers already take care of that. That is being taken care of. Now, availability is another major factor. When I say availability here, it's not just the availability for like the application is always up, but rather it should be available to your other applications or other instances. For instance, how many times have you seen when you try to log into a site and there is an option where you can log in with your YouTube or your Google or Facebook credentials? So that is your single sign-on. So single sign-on is basically your federated login where your username and password are taken care of somebody else and you take care of. Now, if you have 5 or 6 enterprise or apps that you provide within your suite of applications, so in all those cases, your single login system or server rather, that should take care of all the logins, which application should be allowed to log in at what level. So that is taken care by the single server. This is called the identity server in general case. So your identity server is basically it take care of. So you have, let's say, okay, let's take an example. Let's say your attendance system and you have your leave system. Now, assuming these are both two different systems that are independently developed, but again, you want your employees to have the same credentials or same company credentials, company login credentials to join into both these applications. So that is something that is taken care of by a single sign-on server or a federated login, and that comes under availability. Now, of course, if your site in such a case, let's say if your attendance system is dependent on your leave system, I'm assuming these are two different systems hypothetically. So in that case, if your leave system is down, your attendance system would not be able to log in. That is something really bad. So when we say availability, your application should be available to all the applications who use that. It should be scalable. Whenever there's a load of users, it should automatically scale out, it should automatically scale down, and should be able to taken care of basically whatever load or conditions it in. Reliability is again standard concepts. Let's move to the next part. So the biggest benefit for the startup or the small companies is basically the cost factor. So again, as we discussed in the previous slide, if you have a system and if you have a user system and you want to develop basically a set of user logins and everything, in that case, generally what happens, like if you have to prepare a user database, you have to do a very strict and stringent security checks, security testings, penetration testing around those, and everything has to be taken care of. So that requires a significant cost. But again, once we move to the cloud, one of the major advantages is like most of the cloud providers provide a very significant number of free users with limited or basic set of functionalities that are very well good or that are very much sufficient for the startup companies or the mid-size, even the mid-size companies. For a normal flows, they are self-sufficient. So, for instance, I think the Azure and the AWS both provide 50,000 MAUs or the monthly active users free of cost. And I think the Auth0 has around 7,000 or 10,000, something around that, those sort of thing. So, it is provided by default of free. MFA is again voice and SMS can be chargeable for a login depending upon system or subscription plans that you have taken. But again, compared to market, they are much cheaper. If you see the AWS, it charges for per SMS, and the same applies for Microsoft. So there are also free options available for the MFA if you need them, and we are going to discuss all of these areas once we start with the demos. So now coming to the solutions for these, we will be discussing 3 solutions which are more prominent. From Google, there is a Firebase, but we are not going to discuss that in this series. Basically, we will try to cover Azure, which has 2 variants for different use cases. Azure AD, that is for the enterprise users, and Azure AD B2C, that is for the end users of your application, where the applications are end user or client facing. Then we will discuss the AWS Cognito, which is also very good service provided by the AWS. And lastly, we shall discuss the Auth0, and then we discuss. So this is the flow that we will try to cover within the application, and we will do. So again, this series is not targeted like the general theoretical lessons that you have across YouTube. So if you need the basic concept from the examination or certification points, you can, of course, there's a lot of information available. We can try to cover those information, but due to the sake of time, we shall try to use this more efficiently. The focus is a bit different. These are basically targeted towards hands-on development, not towards the theoretical part. So what we'll be doing, so we have covered the basic details. Now we will be doing with the hands-on labs, and within the labs we will be picking up each of these services by the Azure, AWS, and Auth0, and we will see how to configure those from the cloud dashboard, and then how to use that within the client applications. For the client, we shall be using .NET Core 3.1 based application, and we shall try to see like the basic flows. We shall try to cover the very high level scenarios, how to get your app integrated, because that's the major challenge to get it working the first time. There are of course areas where you can extend your app or work around, but again the primary part would be like to get your app working with these providers with a minimal set of configuration. So these all these hands-on labs you can do into individual videos, and they shall be available on GitHub. The link should be pasted within the description. You can pick it from there. So let's move. Let's move to the next video. That is your AWS Cognito lab. So guys, this is going to be a very interesting series because the managed identity or cloud identity is one of the very hot areas, and you need to have the concepts readily available and how to use them. So another aspect of is like while we are covering these labs, we shall also cover some of the basic concepts like the OpenID authentication, the JWT bearer, the format of the JWT token, and how it is being constructed. What are different endpoints? So those are very interesting areas that we shall try to cover. So I would request you guys to press the bell icon and subscribe to our channel, because we shall be posting very interesting videos in the coming times, and you should get updated on those. Just press it out, and if you have any queries, comments, suggestions, whatever, just put it in the comments box and we shall try to cover. Thank you guys. Let's start.